What is up, guys? It's Halsey with the Helicopter Podcast, and I'm always excited. I'm a broken record. I say it on every show. I'm always so excited to have conversations, and today is just one of those days where I was really looking forward to the conversation because anytime I get to podcast with my friends, it's just fun to catch up. But when I get to podcast with other podcasters that are collectively on the vertical HeliCASTS platform, I love that as well because it just makes the conversation a little bit easier. If you're consistently used to doing something like podcasting, it just becomes a little bit more at ease. And so when I get to talk to fellow podcasters, it's kind of like we're all just interviewing each other, but having a conversation. It makes it super easy. So excited to have John Gray and Jack Shanley from the Hangar Z podcast joining my podcast today, talking about a recent experience that I got to do. Before we dive into it, a big shout out to MHM Publishing and the Vertical HeliCASTS platform. If you haven't checked it out yet, I highly encourage that you do. It's my podcast. It's the Hangar Z podcast, of course. The Real Rescue, the Vertical MRO, and we have a new edition. Is that correct, John? Are we saying that yet? Is that something I'm allowed to do?
Breaking news.
Okay, so tell us about that podcast.
Yeah, so within the Vertical HeliCASTS platform, the newest podcast that's going to come to lineup is a podcast called the Valor Flight Crew Podcast. And we think it's really cool. It's going to be basically covering the helicopter air ambulance segment of our industry. What we're trying to do is kind of cover every segment within the helicopter industry. And they're one that, while we talk about it every once in a while, there's so many facets involved in what they do in that industry, from the pilot side, the flight medic, the flight nurse, the flight doctor side, the maintenance side, much different. So we thought it was fitting to have its own podcast. So we've partnered with Echo, Every Coast Helicopter Operations. It's an association that does a really good job, puts on an awesome public safety aviation conference every year. This year it's going to be in Louisville. I'm told it's Louisville. I'm saying Louisville wrong. But so Echo's a fantastic organization, lots of experienced folks, and we're going to bring their experience into the podcast and cover that segment of the industry. So really excited for that. It'll be cool.
Yeah, really excited to hear more from those guys. We got to meet the other day. So that was super fun. Seemed like good guys, and it's fun to see the platform expanding. I think, John really spearheaded this project with Mike Reno a couple of years ago of this idea. And in this last year, especially, man, we've just completely taken flight and turned the HeliCASTS platform into something that's really has legs, right? It's great for the MHM Publishing. They're getting great, ROI on why they have the podcast to allow their consumers just to have another way to digest news and information that's industry specific. And I think for the consumer, it's a win-win because now they're able to read articles that are associated with podcasts or vice versa, just have this multi-level content experience. And so big thanks to John and the Hangar Z podcast specifically, because there really was the brainchild of this platform. So cool. So before we dive into kind of the purpose of today, what's going on in your guys' world? What's up with the Hangar Z podcast? Any previous recent episodes that my listeners should tune into? And maybe some fun interviews to come?
Yeah, we've had a ton of great content. Two things I'll bring up, one of which we covered the firestorm in LA that came through recently.
Yeah.
Interviewed Mike Sagely, who, the guy has a very inspiring career. He was Army pilot, special operations pilot, and then left there and has been a pilot with Lake County Fire for, I think, 16 years. Yeah. So he talked about his experience battling the winds, battling the fire, and all the elements that go with that. Really interesting. And then one additional podcast I'll bring up that's worth checking out. It's a podcast dedicated to how to break into the industry. So if you're in flight school right now and you're like, okay, well, how do I get a job as a EMS pilot? How do I get a job as a law enforcement pilot? It's an episode that we recorded with some of the folks from SR3. They have a really cool training organization, and it was released about 2 weeks ago, and I'm working on pulling up the episode number here. But man, it's just great information because it's really hard to figure out how to get into the industry sometimes. I think we all have a kind of an idea, but it's tough. So, Jack, anything I missed in there that you'd bring up?
Yeah, I'd mention Randy Rolls because Halsey had him on and we had him on. We both had Randy on. An amazing guest. I know Halsey agrees with that. And I watched Halsey's and I learned things that we didn't talk about in the 2 hours we had him. So I think if listeners liked either one of the podcasts and listen to Randy, and how can you not like listening to Randy? You should listen to the other one. If you listen to Hangar's, go listen to the helicopter podcast because they were different. There were some similar stories, but I loved your conversation, Halsey, with Randy. He's a fascinating man, incredible experience, and quite a storyteller. And those were top-notch episodes for both of us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You guys had a great interview with Randy. And yeah, he's totally one of those guests that just make it pretty easy to have an engaging podcast. So, very excited about that. And I just want to touch on, something that John said, and I think this is something that's collectively awesome about the platform is providing this insight and education of getting into the industry. For guys like myself, civilian trained, there wasn't any information. I started flight school around 2008-ish. There was nothing, right? I remember, I was lucky to be able to get onto a website really and, browse along. I think I started working line service and then maybe a few months later, I got an iPhone, the very first generation. So, that's how long ago it really was, right? And so things have just changed so dramatically. And I would say by and large, people that are reaching out to me and messaging me, it's to say thanks for the education. And so I think it's just so cool. I need to educate myself. I'm drinking these bubbles right now, and this is a horrible idea because I'm trying not to burp, and it hurts when you hold the burp.
While you work on the bubbles, I'll just say that the conversation we had with the SR3 folks it's called Breaking In, a conversation on how to get into public safety aviation. It's episode 225, and it was released January 16th on the Hangar Z podcast. So again, a flight medic, hoist operator, law enforcement pilot, HIMS pilot. If you're interested in those areas, check that episode out. It has lots of great information from folks who've done it. So
that's so cool. Yeah. And again, it's just one of the amazing parts of this podcast. For us, we just like talking. It's great conversation. I get to learn a ton and meet new cool people and talk to existing friends like you guys. But we're just offering some really fun content. Super excited for Verticon this year, the first ever Verticon. Obviously, it's formerly known as HAI, so expecting lots of the same excitement of HAI, but with a new rebrand, and excited to kind of see what that's all about. Excited, of course, to see you guys in person, which is a good segue. I get to see Jack in person fairly often. Jack and I call Central Oregon home. He's in the nicer part. He's in Bend. I'm in Redmond. I get it. He's a little bit cooler than I am. He bought at a good time though. He's been here a lot longer.
I did.
I bought when the rates were high, and I guess Bend. I was reading an article recently, Jack. I'm sure you can believe it. Bend is apparently the most expensive city right now in the state of Oregon.
I'm not surprised.
Which is just crazy.
It feels that way.
So thank you, California.
Yeah.
Yes. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah. Seattle, Portland. They all send everybody here.
Yeah. Let me tell you about Bend. It sucks. You don't want to live there. Don't move here. I promise. The weather's
you see the
horrible.
bumper stickers.
There's
bumper stickers that say Bend sucks. Don't move here. And it used to be that was all tongue in cheek. Now it's like, it's kind of coming true. It's too much traffic,
too much
nonsense.
To see this town grow, it's been nuts. I've been coming here since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And it's a big change, but it's a lovely place, and I get it, right?
Yeah.
California aside, a lot of people would find Bend, like my wife and I, much more appealing than, say, moving into the Valley. Not even for just the Portland considerations, just the weather. The weather in the Valley is so gloomy and gray, and it's just so nice to live in the high desert. So that said, Jack and I get to hang out, and we were recently at one of our favorite eateries, my favorite new eatery, Hawkeye Huckleberry. And
that was great.
I was mentioning that my wife and I were going to go visit her grandparents in LA. and that I was excited to. I could never live in LA. I'll give you that, Jack. You live there. You're a saint. You work there. I couldn't live there, but I like visiting. And you were like, "Hey, you should go on a ride along with the LAPD helicopter unit." Of course, right? So I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know that was like a thing that you do. I've done a ride along in Austin in a patrol car, but going in the helicopter, I figured there was liability or issues, and so I just was a total surprise. So I got to go, and man, I have to say, when I got done with my flight, I was a little disappointed that I hadn't maybe looked into doing that for a career for myself.
Yeah.
So I guess let me just give you my audience a little bit of the setup of the day and kind of what the experience was, and then we can just chat about it.
Okay.
Talk about your guys' experience, learn a little bit more about law enforcement, and maybe how people could get involved in doing it. Because, I've been flying helicopters for a long time, and when I was doing that ride along, I was thinking to myself, like, man, this is really fun. Some of the highlights for me was the adventure of it. I don't know if that's the right word.
Oh, that's a good word.
But there we were patrolling our sector of, LA space, which was kind of all the valley. I forget exactly where it was, but it was pretty much like everything in the valley up to like the Hollywood Hills, essentially, and all the way to like Malibu, Santa Monica. And, you're just up there flying, and there was this anticipation of like, is there going to be a call? And there we are, kind of zigzagging back and forth. And then all of a sudden there's some chaos on the radio, and the helicopter goes, banks over, noses over, and we're off, right? And the first call was like a robbery, and the suspect was on foot, and they were running, and so we end up over this what looked like a pretty sketchy part of LA. And we were starting to orbit. We could see all the police on the ground there. And something that I didn't realize is the coordination, specifically from the TFO. So the tactical flight officer, he was directly in contact with the ground crew, and he was setting up like perimeters. Like, okay, you guys go in this, and then we're going to set up a second perimeter here with you guys, and then a third perimeter. And I kind of felt like he was the orchestrator of the whole thing. And for that particular call, we didn't really get to we didn't catch the guy. We thought maybe we had him, but it was just some homeless dude. So that call didn't really go anywhere. But that was a really neat experience, specifically watching the TFO in action. I'm not going to say any names. This TFO was a new TFO. And so I figured we could start by talking about the TFO, because that whole experience, watching him coordinate, watching him also direct the pilot on where to go and the navigation portion. And for this guy being new, I think he said he was 5 or 6 months into it. I mean, they seem like a well-oiled machine. So, Jack, you're an LAPD guy, so you can speak to that. John, I know that you also had TFO experience. What is that position like? What is training like? What is the attrition rate through training there at LA? Just tell me a little bit more about the TFO and your guys' experience as TFOs.
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
Sure. That's a great question. First of all, it's the hardest. The tactical flight officer job is the hardest job in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that. John believes it.
Yep.
Everyone we talk to, especially people that have done both, which John and I both have experienced, we can say firsthand, the TFO job is much, much more challenging than the pilot job. That's not to say the pilot job isn't challenging. It is, but in a different way. And the ways that you're describing, Halsey, are what we're talking about. The TFO is the conductor in tactical situations, and they are placing units where they feel it is necessary to try and contain whoever they're chasing at that time, or calling the pursuit. They're the conductor, they're the voice, they're the person that's communicating, coordinating all the tactics and making suggestions to ground personnel from their very unique point of view. So it takes a good communicator that's probably the biggest trait. If you're not a good communicator, you will never be a TFO. And as far as attrition rates, I mean, LA has changed over the years through learning better techniques and better ways of doing things. It used to be a 90% washout rate on a 1 month loan. 90% didn't make it. It's now about 50. And that has gotten better because of Manny Dickerson, the chief TFO, former Hangar Z podcast guest also. Manny changed a lot of things, educated people before they got up there in a different way so that they're really ready on day one. Because as every single helicopter pilot knows, you've been on the ground all your life, and now you get in this aircraft and you go up, things look different. I mean, really different. And some people grasp onto it quickly, but many don't. They can find their own house from the air. Believe me, I've seen that happen 100 times where we say, hey, where do you live? And on ride-alongs, for instance, or brand new TFOs. Hey, you live in the city? Yeah, I live over here. And they can't find their own house. That's interesting, isn't it? These are experienced police officers. So it's a unique job and it's not for everyone. But when you find somebody that's good at it, it's the best job in the world. Very rewarding.
It seemed fun. Yeah, it seemed like, from my perspective, this particular TFO was just locked in, right? He was in control of the situation, and it was really fun to watch him. And even knowing that he was new, I was just so surprised. Like, man, this guy's locked in for being new. But you're totally right. I mean, you look at LA, and LA's a crazy example because LA is so huge. So I could see it being very confusing. I remember when I was learning to fly, I would fly over like my hometown. I'd be like, man, I can't believe this is my hometown. It doesn't look anything like what it looks like on the ground. And then you throw in just the helicopter part of it. Things happen very fast in the helicopter, especially in LA, right? I can imagine driving from Santa Monica to, say, downtown LA. That could be a 45-minute to an hour drive.
Maybe more.
Maybe more. Where in the helicopter, it's 3 minutes, right?
That's right.
From downtown, I'm looking at Santa Monica, right? And then continuing on. So I think it's probably the pace of things that is also very challenging. So I was very impressed. John, speak to me a little bit about some of the technology that I was seeing from the TFO that day. I mean, I know that your setup was maybe a little bit different than LAPD, but man, it seemed like they had like a map that they could put in physical addresses that would then guide the helicopter essentially in the air, GPS wise. So what is some of the technology, the cameras, and some of the cool cockpit items that the TFO has at their disposal?
Yeah, the technology behind what we're doing is really impressive. It really makes what we're doing more effective and efficient. Doing that job without that technology can be really tough. If you've just got a set of binoculars and Jack, you're used to the old map, the paper map.
Yep.
Your job was much more difficult. Now it's very common for a law enforcement helicopter to be outfitted with a very high-tech camera system that has about a 3-mile range of visibility. That also has a map overlay system built into it. So if you've seen any NFL games, you see the overlay on like the 50-yard line, say, or the first down marker, where they superimpose a line across the 50-yard line or that first down marker. We're essentially using that same technology with the camera systems and the mapping systems. They're overlaying those lines and markers on streets and telling you what street you're looking at. You can even see what address you're looking at. You've got the daytime color camera systems. You've got the infrared camera systems that are helping you work at not only at night, but in the daytime hours as well. The searchlights, you all seen those. I think people refer to them as the ghetto bird. You see those things flying around at night, and that's the call of the ghetto bird is that light. But very powerful light system. I think the guts of any police helicopter is going to be the radio. We talk about the communications that take place, and you saw those communications firsthand. Very important to be effective and efficient with the words that you're using when you communicate. So that the technology really is great, but the radio is really the most important piece of technology that exists within that aircraft. So it's exciting as a pilot and a CFO when we have a ride along and they'd see that technology firsthand. It was really cool to look at the expressions in their face and their mind would be blown. Really cool stuff. It's neat to work with and makes, policing our cities and making our communities safer so much more efficient, effective. So that's
it was
kind
cool.
of-
I was sitting kind of in the back middle so I could peek through and have a good vantage, specifically of the TFO. The pilot, great also, fantastic at what he was doing. But I was more fascinated actually by the tactical flight officer. And at one point, not on the first call, but the second call, we were looking for another bad guy. And they flipped the camera to the infrared and they were trying to get like a heat signature. I don't know if infrared's the right word.
It is.
But, they were trying to get a heat signature inside kind of this, not a building, obviously, but in this alleyway between these buildings. And they were trying to use that to hopefully, find this guy. Unfortunately, we went on 4 different calls that day to go find bad guys, and each time we came up empty-handed, which there's so much space, right? There's only so much law enforcement, and so I think the bad guys have this crazy advantage, to be honest.
They do.
Especially in the LA area. It seemed like there's so many abandoned buildings and warehouses where we were patrolling that it was like, man, if they just hide out in there, it's going to be very hard. And the helicopter at that point isn't super effective because they can't see through the building. So, unfortunately, we didn't catch anyone, but it was just a neat experience. Again, the TFO, fantastic job. Jack, speak to me a little bit on the LA thing, because what I was thinking of as well, and I was trying to kind of grasp it, but I didn't get a full sense. And so maybe you can tie it in for me. But I've had jobs where I felt like I'm having to, air medical is a good example. When I would fly into San Antonio, I had to talk to like this MedCom, and then I'm talking to Tower, and then I'm talking to our SynCom, which is the internal, and then I'm talking on a common helicopter frequency. So I think it was like 4 or 5 different radio communications, and I could essentially monitor multiple radios and talk on one. And it was a bit of a ballet sometimes of moving through the different frequencies or comms of what I'm talking on and what I'm monitoring. When you're flying in LA, as a pilot perspective, how hard is it to start managing just the airspace, the comms, then your police comms? Just tell me a little bit about that.
It's a great question, because that's one of the biggest challenges, I would say, especially where LAPD is patrolling. There's at least 7 towers that you talk to constantly. That's a lot of different airspaces. And on top of that, you have an air-to-air frequency, which is common nationwide, 123.025. And so you're talking on that to other aircraft. And then you're listening to the police frequencies, because you need to listen to what the tactical flight officer is listening to most of the time. You can turn it off if you're overloaded, but as you get better and more experienced, we told our pilots, you got to have that on, because you might hear something they miss, and vice versa. So it's a lot, and there's a lot going through your head, but it just takes experience. And our training program is such that for instance, we require that you memorize all those tower frequencies, ATIS. You have to have those memorized. Yes, they're in the radio. You can scroll, but you got to take a test. I mean, because we want you to have that. So that's one less thing you have to worry about. Now you can worry about, where is that airspace? What altitude am I at? Especially in a pursuit, when you're bouncing around and suddenly you're southbound on the 405 freeway and you're coming up on LAX, and the runways are right up against the 405 and you're in a pursuit. It takes some experience and some good training, and it just kind of comes slowly to where by the time you're out on your own, it's not as complicated as it seems. We go other places. John and I talked about this, where we go out to other places and visit, and we go, oh my gosh, your airspace is insane. And they look at us and go, well, LA is crazy. And we don't look at it that way. John doesn't, I don't, because we did it so many times. It became daily, and just, I hate the word routine, but I'll use it anyway. It became routine, where you weren't challenged by that anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's just something that you do all the time. And I think that my pilot that I was with that day, I mean, I think he was on about 10 years already. And he must have been also listening to the police frequency, because he was almost reacting faster than the TFO at times. Like, the second he would hear something in this direction, boom, helicopters banked over.
Yeah.
We're pulling, 9+ on the FLI, and they're going.
Yeah.
And so it seemed like he was pretty locked in.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway secret word. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's secret word is rotor. Visit contests.verticalhelicast.com to enter the secret word.
And that's not, by the way, that's not the way it is in the beginning. If you're a brand new TFO, if that was that TFO's first month, the pilot plays dumb and you don't turn. You heard it. You know we're going to turn left, but they have to tell you to turn left.
You wait.
And to guide you and navigate you. But then once they earn their wings, now it's a team. Now it's crew resource management. Now, if I hear something, I'm turning toward that call before the dispatcher's done talking because I know where the division is, where the general area is. The TFO is going to fine tune that and walk me into it. But I know where the general area is by what I've already heard. So yeah, it's a team.
The career path is important to bring up too.
Yes.
Most agencies, and I think it's best practice, you start in the field as a police officer. Once you prove that you've gotten the handle and the hang of being a police officer, you can apply to go to aviation. Usually, agencies want 3 to 5 years of service. I had 9 before I went to aviation. So the more time you have in the field to understand what's happening on the ground, the better. So you get to aviation and you understand tactics, you understand the way pursuits and all these critical operations work. So when you get into the position where as a TFO, you're now tasked with managing that, you're not lost. But you get up there as a TFO, and like Jack said in the beginning, it's difficult. You're getting used to managing not just one police radio that you're used to in your car. You're now managing 5, 6, 7 different frequencies. And you can adjust the volumes of those frequencies based on the priority of the frequency. But then when you move from the TFO spot, if you get selected to become a pilot, that level of police chatter or radio chatter isn't overwhelming to you because you've already been sitting in that seat hearing that radio traffic now for 2, 3, 4 years, however long the time is that it took you to get to that pilot seat. So moving over there, it's not a complete shock to the system. Some agencies will bring in a civilian pilot where that person may not have had any police experience. So they're now sitting in a seat where they're used to talking maybe on an air to air and probably to the tower. Well, now they've got 6, 7, 8 different frequencies they're monitoring. It's tough. It can be done, but it's tough. So that's kind of the career progression. So from patrol to TFO, then to pilot, and it sets you up very well to be successful, I think.
Yeah, to be honest, before I met you guys and learned more about it and then get to experience it firsthand, especially in a crazy airspace and crazy law enforcement place like LA, I always thought it was a little bit weird actually that police would be, as a 2,000-hour pilot, like I couldn't just go to Austin PD where I lived and, hey, hire me to be a helicopter pilot. Oh no, you got to be a cop on the ground. And I always used to think like, oh man, it just seems so backwards to me because it's like, why would you want to do that? But yeah, you bring up such a good point that you actually have to understand like policing, right? You have to have this you have to almost be an expert. I feel like if you're a TFO, especially in somewhere like this busy like LA, you have to know what it's like for the guys on the ground to be an effective TFO.
Exactly.
So it definitely makes sense to me of why it's like cop first, no matter if you have flight experience or not, and then you work your way into it. But before getting into it and knowing you guys, I always thought that was a little backwards. One thing that I was really impressed with was the teamwork aspect. And when I flew air medical, I was flying in an age, this is the new age of air medical, where we had nice equipment, we had bosses that respected our decisions, and then we had a big push for this crew resource management. In fact, we spent a whole week, I called it the Kumbaya week, at training of like, hey, how do we not be assholes to each other, essentially, training. And don't call the med crew self-loading baggage anymore, right? Incorporate them into the mission. And so I actually took that really to heart. I was so fortunate. I had great crews, very smart people, good at what they do, but also really good about being in the helicopter and understanding the helicopter and helping me. I had a medic, Russell, shout out. I've shouted him out before on the podcast. I think he might have saved us from hitting a tower legitimately one night, unlit, non-reported tower in the middle of nowhere. He saw it on his goggles and I didn't see it. And, his quick response to me allowed me to maneuver away from it. So, I had a great experience with my crews, and I was impressed when I was flying and doing the ride along in LA. of watching the pilot and the TFO work together. My question is, and I know that you guys might have different answers, and so I'm happy to hear both, but let's say like on a weekly basis, am I flying with a new TFO? Not a new, but like a different TFO every day? Or am I consistently flying with the same person? And how do you manage the relationship to make sure that there's strong team cohesion?
It's a great question again, Halsey. You're nailing them here.
Really good. Look, I don't even prepare for these things, guys.
I know.
Isn't it crazy?
Believe me, we know. That's a great question. And the answer for in LA, it's going to be different. John's answer is going to be different. In LA, because there's 25 TFOs, you're going to fly with the same group that's on your watch, day watch or night watch or graveyard shift. And so there will be multiple people that you'll fly with. It won't be the same person every day, unless you're training them or you could be consistent with one, but you got to be ready. Every day at work, you look at the board to see who you're working with. So it could be any one of 7 or 8 TFOs, but they're all trained the same, very consistent. It is emphasized that you are a team. Crew resource management is a high priority for not only safety, but for catching bad guys. Pilots see bad guys that TFOs don't see. It happens. You got to be able to communicate and talk and know what each other needs. So because of the emphasis on CRM, it doesn't matter who's there. It really doesn't. And do some teams work together better than others? I would say yes, if they work together a lot. But as far as safety and not hesitating to call out a tower or wires and then saying, well, that's not really my job. I just keep my mouth shut. No, if we hit that tower, you're dying too. You better speak up. Now, that wasn't always the case. You kind of mentioned the old school medevac stuff. Guess what? There was old school law enforcement. JAFO from the movie Blue Thunder was real. Just another effing observer. They were called observers and not TFOs. And it was like, just sit there and shut up and handle your radios. Don't even look over on my side of the cockpit. That was real. Hollywood got that from LAPD air support. Those days are long past, and we're safer and we catch more bad guys, and everything's positive that we got rid of that baggage, talking luggage, or, that was old. It needed to go. And now it's there's no wall between pilot and TFO anymore.
One of the great things as a pilot, if you've got a good TFO sitting next to you on the safety side, is that TFO is going to say, hey, you've got the traffic crosswind, left crosswind or whatever. He knows what it is, or she knows what that terminology means. Whereas if the TFO doesn't know that, they might say, hey, you see that airplane right there? Where's right there? I have no idea what you're saying. You could point, it doesn't know. I don't know. But by saying the correct terminology, it makes a big difference. But for my agency, it was different. We were assigned the same partner for 6 months, and there's benefits to that. The benefit that I found was you really, really get to know your partner's strengths and weaknesses, and during that 6-month period. So you work off those. If your TFO's weak, looking out the window, then as a pilot, you're going to help your TFO while they're in the camera. You're going to be looking out the window more than normal. So working off those strengths and weaknesses is great. One thing you brought up, which I think is important to talk about, is, how do you maintain this kind of cohesive culture that's positive? You have a lot of type A personalities in aviation, and you can create a really bad environment and culture by bringing the wrong people in. So in law enforcement aviation, public safety aviation in general, really, really important to spend a lot of time selecting people before you actually select them. Vetting their ability to come into not just to do the job, but to get along with the folks that are inside. So you bring one bad person in, it ruins the whole patch, and so it's really, really important to foster that culture and to develop a positive, safe, and fun working culture. I just can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, well said, John.
Yeah, nice. And I think that actually goes back to some points that I've touched on in the podcast before, and I'm sure you guys have probably had similar conversations, because a lot of times people will ask me, how can I get this job, or how should I do this? And you guys actually just did your SR3 thing on getting into the industry. And of course there's nuances, right? And there's aeronautical experience requirements. There's things that are like hard set numbers that are not objective to you as a human at all. It's just like insurance requirements or whatever it may be. but that's like actually a very small part of it. I've never really been in a position. I hired instructors back in the day, and I did that for a couple years. So that was my only really experience of hiring flying positions. Otherwise, I hire people for my business now and things like that. But my common advice is be a person that people want to be around. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that would have to be very much the same within law enforcement aviation, because if you maybe gain a reputation on the ground of being someone that's a bit of a mean person to be around, or someone that's difficult, or someone that's not enjoyable to be around, then it's probably, I'm guessing that kind of conversation might come up during like an interview, right? It's like, if you haven't really minded your P's and Q's during your time on the ground, then you probably should expect not to have the opportunity to fly in the aviation unit. So, I mean, would that be big advice for people that are aspiring of, hey, look, show up, work hard, and have a good attitude? Are those kind of like the top 3 things in law enforcement to progress into becoming an aviator in law enforcement?
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
I think so. I think that the saying, the 2 things you can control are effort and attitude. And that 100% outlines how to get into police aviation, in my opinion. If you have a good attitude and your work ethic strong, those are the precursors for a good TFO. In the field, your reputation precedes you. So if you do a bad job as a patrol officer, you're not taking care of your beat, your assigned area, people are going to know about that. So whether you're applying to aviation or anywhere else, your name's going to come up as someone you may not want to work with. And that same thing continues in aviation. As we all know, it's a very small community. So be careful of what bridges you burn and the things you say to people, because your reputation does precede you.
Yeah, we talked about that before on the podcast, and I knew John was going to jump on that because he's hot on that, and as he should be. I'll add one thing to the TFO position, which then leads to the pilot position in many cases, is that in the interview we'd say, tell us about the last time you got into a tactical situation and what assets you used and how you coordinated that. And it was somebody sat there in wonderment and going, and they couldn't think of one, or, 5 years ago, that was a clue to us. This is not what we're looking for. We want tacticians. We want people that can think on their feet. We want people that can that can think and make decisions, tactical decisions, because some of them are life and death from the air. What the advice I give from the air could affect your life on the ground. Stop! Don't go around that corner. I mean, Kevin Means, it's the best example. The beginning of the Hangar Z podcast, you hear, don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Well, that's Kevin Means telling an officer, don't go over that fence because there's a guy with a shotgun pointing at that is about to shoot you. He saved that officer's life. So because that's the kind of job it can be, we need decisive people and tactical people, and that you have to think about as you're going through your career to get to that position you want.
Great point. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's one thing I noticed on my ride along is just the fast pace of it. Like,
it's really
I just can't stress enough. It's like we're flying at, 4.5 or 5 on the FLI, which is chill, and then boom, it's 9+, banked over, going fast, and you're en route
all day long.
And there's a million radios going on. We're going into Santa Monica. Oh no, wait, now we're going over to Burbank, and now we're talking to this person. We're doing that. And it was like, man, these guys are really a well-oiled machine. I was so impressed. I mean, it was just. And I'm guessing that if I could have been in with any flight crew that day and had the same experience,
yes.
I think that probably most law enforcement agencies do a pretty good job, but I would guess that LAPD, being the largest helicopter unit, definitely is a well-oiled machine. So that was just really neat to be a part of that. And it did actually seem like the camaraderie of it all was also pretty tight. I was sitting in this, I kind of felt like I was in a movie a little bit, because it seemed look, I'm not a law enforcement guy, right? So my experiences of understanding law enforcement actually will, go into Hollywood, and walking into maybe a darker precinct, and people are talking and having their conversations, and it's kind of how I felt walking into that LAPD air unit. There is a little bit older of a facility.
Yep.
There was some buzzing of doors coming in and things like that. It was a confusing hallway system. The locker room was kind of old and ghetto, to be honest. I think the LA City Council should improve the locker room situation. I'm just saying that out loud. And then I'm in this big room with all these comfortable chairs, and we're watching a black and white silent movie, which was really bizarre. And these guys are talking, and they're talking about going out with their wives and spouses, and hey, let's hang out, and we're doing this type of gift exchange. It was, Christmas time. We're doing this, we're doing that. So it definitely seemed like everyone was pretty tight with each other, and, friends and things like that. So I'm guessing the camaraderie is important. One thing I found interesting, and John, I'll be curious to hear what your experience is, and then maybe you guys can speak as a whole. You talk to so many law enforcement agencies, but one downside of something I learned was the schedule. And I would say the lack thereof consistent schedule. So when I was talking to the TFO and the pilot about, oh, is this your shift that you're on all the time? The answer was, well, no. This is a shift that I'm on currently, and I could be on this shift for a month, or I could be on it for 6 months. It could be nights. It's like there's no consistency, it felt like. And even the days off, I'd say, okay, well, do you have consistent days off in a week? No, we find that out, a couple weeks before, or the month before. I forget exactly what it was. So, Jack, talk to me a little bit through LA specific scheduling. John, I'm curious to hear what your, schedule was like, because I think that's a work-life balance thing that should be considered. And then I'm just curious to hear, as a law enforcement whole, what you guys have seen.
Well, first of all, I want the names of the whiners that were complaining about days off on LAPD, because
they weren't. No, they weren't whining.
I know.
They were answering my question.
I know. I'm kidding.
In fact, they had a great attitude. I would have been John. John especially knows me. I'm a whiner, so I would have been whining all day long about. Hold on, you're not going to give me a consistent couple of days off? Trust me. There's no whining.
So, Halsey, if I came to you and said every month, you get to pick what days off you want for the next month. You get to pick them. Okay. Now, you can't pick all weekends because that's not a team player. But if you really need a weekend, you can circle it in red and you're getting it. That doesn't sound too bad, does it? It's awesome. Most police departments are not like that. They know their days off a year in advance. LAPD, you choose them every month. It's a lot of work. Somebody has to balance. So as far as moving different watches, it's not, he might have said, yeah, I could be here for a month or 6 months. Most of the time you're there for as long as you want to be. I was on a watch. I was on graveyards for probably 2 years before I got bumped to a different watch. And that was by choice. I wanted to work that watch because that's when the action is. I did it in K9 and I did it at Air Support. So LA's kind of unique. And that's why I'm kidding about give me their names, because it's a great system. And I know they know it too. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
but
they were
most police departments are like that.
I was complaining for them, Jack.
I know. I understand, Halsey.
I need to know my schedule in advance. I'm a planner, buddy.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
And
I know.
a month is just not enough. I'm sorry, but also John does know I'm just a complainer in general. So it's like it's not too far away. John, what was your schedule like? You're I don't think we've said it during the podcast. You've been on my show, but you were with Ontario PD.
Yeah, Ontario PD. We're about 40 miles east of LA, a suburb community of LA.
And how big is Ontario? Just I'm not familiar personally, and just to give a sense for my audience, like how many helicopters did you have? How many pilots did you have? Situation like that.
The city of Ontario is about 60 square miles, so not huge. There's about 300,000 residents in the city of Ontario. We had 3 helicopters. So they're all the H-125s when I retired. And we had a staff of 12 folks at the hangar that, 2 mechanics, physical analyst, flying sergeant, and then 4 different air crews consisting of pilots and tactical flight officers. So Ontario wasn't huge. In fact, pretty small air unit. And we covered the cities surrounding Ontario, Chino, Rancho Cucamonga, Upland. Montclair. We'd go into Pomona and different cities. So we'd help cover the valley area. So it made our response area much bigger. But we were on a 6-month staffing rotation. So you knew in advance for 6 months what your days off are supposed to be. Having said that, being a part of a small unit, if someone needed a day off that was, working, then the only people that really are there to fill those days off are you and your days off. So you might find out on your Friday, hey, guess what? You're working tomorrow. So it is challenging, but everyone loves the job and is willing to help out their coworkers to get done what needs to get done, which is great. So the work-life balance that you described can be challenging, but the work itself is amazing. So,
and I'm guessing any law enforcement job, work-life balances can be tested at times, right?
All the time.
I feel like it's a profession similar to aviation too. A lot of aviation jobs, especially on the helicopter side, AIDS is a common thing. Aviation-induced divorce syndrome. It's hard to work-life balance. In fact, I chose my path early of how I wanted to do my helicopter career because I was interested in a family and getting married. And now I'm getting married and about to start my family. I'm like, man, I should have done more as a 20-year-old, darn it. So why was I thinking about that stuff now? That was 18 years ago. What the hell was I thinking? But interesting, and just part of it, right? I think being in aviation law enforcement specifically is kind of in my opinion, biased, but it seems like the coolest, other than K9. And Jack and I talked a lot about K9 when he came on the podcast. I'm just so I love dogs.
Yeah.
So fascinated by the K9s and how they interact with law enforcement. And that was such a fun conversation that I got to have with Jack. I think we spent probably 15 minutes of a helicopter podcast talking about
on dogs,
on dogs and K9s. But man, incredible. And I'm guessing K9s will interact also with the helicopter
all the time,
which is pretty cool. I remember actually when I worked at Hillsborough, the Hillsborough PD, maybe the sheriff's department too. I don't really know exactly who it was. This is a long time ago. But every year they would come and they would familiarize themselves because they would contract with Hillsborough in case of like man with gun, we need a helicopter, but it's not a helicopter unit situation. So it's like, Hillsborough could dispatch one of their 206s, take the door off. And, the cops would come and practice, being in the door with their gun. And then they would bring the dogs in and out while the helicopter was running. And, I can imagine that's probably pretty scary for a dog, a helicopter and things like that. We got about 15 minutes. I think it's important to talk about. And with my listening base, please go and support the Hangar Z. Even if you're not necessarily on a trajectory of going into law enforcement, it's just so cool of what they do and the stories that they tell. And the people that they get to talk to is really incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are just absolutely killing it with your guests and such a cool podcast, great content. But I think one of the things that I've learned, and now that I get to connect with guys like Jack and John and develop these relationships, I think it's easy when you're a civilian to have one thought of law enforcement. I've certainly had my experiences. I've shared it with Jack and John of some negative experiences I've had with law enforcement. And I'm guessing you guys too have probably had some
Sure.
negative experiences, but getting to know you guys has been awesome and get to see how great you guys are. Then getting to go into this ride along and seeing how professional these individuals were and, how precise and it's a dangerous job too. Like, putting themselves out there and doing it every day. I'm just so impressed with law enforcement. And now I know that there's a push to defund law enforcement, specifically aviation units, because they are expensive, right? They represent a large part of the budget. Jack, talk to me a little bit about just the impact the LAPD helicopter unit has on the LA community. What does life without LAPD helicopter unit look like?
Wow. It would be quite different. I'll tell you that, because the Los Angeles Police Department, as famous as it is, mainly because of Hollywood and because of pursuits, everybody thinks, oh, they've got everything. They got all the equipment. They got tons of officers. LAPD is like 11th in the country for per capita officers. So we're really dangerously undermanned. It's been like that for decades, and it's gotten worse since I left, 8 years ago. They've gone down dramatically in numbers. It was close to 10,000. It's about 8,500 right now.
Well,
So-
I would suspect that that's common across the entire nation because it's kind of hard to be a cop right now.
Yes, it is common across the nation. So that's where air support kind of fills that gap. You're getting the calls first at scene. 50% of the calls you go to, you're first at scene as a helicopter. And many times you're able to stop what's going on, or at least observe it and direct officers to it quickly to stop the fight or the shooting or, whatever's going on. So it's become part of the culture of the department. It's been around for 60 plus years. And if it disappeared tomorrow, crime would go up dramatically. It just would. Everybody knows it. Some won't admit it. And it's just the first thing that officers ask for. Get them an air unit. Get them an air unit. You hear that on the radio constantly because they know that we're going to get there quickly, and your light's going to come on them, and you're going to catch that bad guy that just tried to kill them or run them over or shoot at them. It's really become a necessity, not just a luxury. And we tell people all the time and talk to so many units and tell them your unit needs to be a necessity, not a luxury. And when you reach that point, you're gold. But it's hard. It takes time. It takes a lot of work and takes dedication. But it would be a catastrophe if it disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate because even after my experience, I was pretty excited to share it. I'm at dinner that night with family on my in-law side. And none of them said this, but they were with some other friends that were local to LA, lived in LA their entire life. And one of them made a comment about like the unnecessary use of all the resources. Why don't they just use drones? I think is what the comment was.
Sure.
And here I am like, don't poo-poo on my parade. I just had a great time. I'm going to share my experience, you old hag. And this is, and this is an individual that I have continual issues with, to be honest. And to me, it was an interesting comment because it's almost like, I don't know if politicians are acting in bad faith within the inner political scene of LA itself, but there's maybe a mismessage. There's a disconnect because I don't think people realize the impact that the helicopter air unit does. What can LAPD as a whole do to better educate the community of the impact of the helicopter?
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
That's a hard one. I mean, it's something that we think about and strive for all the time. I think this discussion on the helicopter podcast helps that. The Hangar Z certainly helps it. We're able to say, hey, why don't you watch this episode and you'll see what we really do kind of thing. Because the average person doesn't have any clue what law enforcement aviation does in this country. They have no clue. They don't know the impact. They don't see it firsthand. They just know it's noisy and expensive. Mm-hmm. That's what that person was relaying. Oh, and a drone could do it. False.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that we talk about all the time, and we try it's one of the goals of the Hangar Z is to portray law enforcement aviation in a positive light and expose the truth, the facts, and the personalities and the equipment, and that eventually maybe we'll get a grip. But it's hard. It's hard to reach everybody.
Yeah, no, it's really hard. And, again, I think there's a false narrative specifically right now around law enforcement. And hopefully that changes. I think with this new administration, they're going to be more pro pushing law enforcement and the importance of law enforcement. Obviously, without law and order, things would be chaotic. And the helicopter specifically just serves such a vital role. John, you come from a city that's a little bit smaller, still large, 300,000 people is a big population. What kind of impact does 3 helicopters and 12 people have on a community that's the size of, say, Ontario, California?
It's unbelievable. And what I'll tell you is for a while, I was in charge of running up a weekly and monthly report that would go to our command staff. And that report would contain the notable incidents that we were a part of. Not all the hundreds of calls that we were a part of that weren't really notable, but the really notable ones. And you'd think, well, how many notable calls could you really work, in a given week or a given month? Man, it's crazy. The things that we catch from an aviation standpoint that wouldn't have been caught otherwise is unreal. Robbery suspects, pursuits, homicide suspects, prevention of officers and citizens being killed.
Yeah.
Theft suspects, everything you can think of, we caught. And writing these weekly activity reports, really, it was like, holy cow, I'm a part of these air crews, but I don't see all the activity on all the shifts because I'm not there. So then when I'd come back and write them each week or each month, I'd be like, holy cow, sometimes in the monthly reports, we had so many, I had to decide which ones to get rid of. You're like, well, man, there was all these pursuits and all these really notable incidents. Which one do I cut out? So I think about that. And then I think of a city like LA, who's much bigger, much more activity. Those activity reports have got to be mind blowing. So like Jack said, part of our goal in the Hangar Z podcast is to promote all that good work that's being done with these aviation units. One thing that I think we could do better is promoting ourselves via social media. A lot of people consume information these days by social media. I think government agencies, in particular law enforcement, has tended to be a little reluctant, a little afraid of handing the keys to an officer, a pilot, a TFO, to the social media account. But you think about the insight you get as a citizen, if you were to see LAPD's air support unit, which they do have a great social media page, you get to see where your tax money is going, and you get to see the good work that's being done by these units. In a sense, you get to see the weekly activity report, some of these notable incidents that are being relayed by social media. So I'd look forward to more agencies and more cities, more municipalities, including these social media stories as part of what they're doing. I think it's really important.
Well, I think that you guys are really helping a lot with that. I mean, we talked about it. We had a meeting yesterday, unrelated to necessarily law enforcement itself, but we were talking about, you were mentioning some of the exciting things that you're working on. And you had mentioned that one of the agencies at first was a little reluctant to have a podcast because they can't necessarily control what a person will say. But then you were able to educate that officer who's in charge of the marketing efforts and say, hey, look, this is actually to help you guys. This is a benefit to come and share what a great operation, what a great facility, what a great agency you guys are. And then they kind of change their tune. Oh, okay, well, let's do that, right? Yeah. And I think that, by you guys creating a voice for law enforcement aviation, more and more agencies will hopefully, come and join you on your podcast. You guys are doing some awesome road shows, by the way, and going and meeting with agencies in person and doing experiences and sharing that content, that BTS, that behind the scenes. And I think for civilians, when it comes to law enforcement, we like the behind the scenes stuff because it humanizes the person. It's easy for me to look at a cop and be like, that guy's a robot or something. It's different when I go out to dinner and I'm chatting with Jack, who's, how long were you in law enforcement, Jack?
Too long. Almost
and he's still
34
training.
years.
And he's still training, and then it's like, oh, well, Jack is a human. Jack has human experiences and he has goals and things. And so I think if they utilize social media to show that behind the scenes and show the human side of it, I think that would have a big impact. And, if you're listening to this podcast, and again, we have a small footprint, I get that, but we have a footprint, and collectively our voices could be louder and louder. Think about the lives saved. I bet you, and not even just saved, right? Because anytime one person dies, there's then a spider web effect of other people that are affected. Spouses, family members, friends, kids, you name it, right? One person dying is a whole bunch of people feeling very sad and very affected. And I'm guessing in communities like Ontario and LA, on a given week, you're probably preventing, hundreds of people having a bad week by losing a loved one or a horrible accident happening or someone getting shot. So, there's no way to ever know the impact, right, I'm sure, when it comes to lives saved. But I'm guessing in agencies like LA and Ontario even, it would have to be thousands of lives every year are better because of aviation law enforcement.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And we'll never know because you can't prove it. Statistically, people like numbers. But we do know that criminals have told us oh man, I can't believe that helicopter was flying today. I picked today to rob that bank because it was kind of rainy and cloudy and I didn't think they'd be up. That's a fact. We've heard that from criminals. So do criminals change their behavior because of air units? Of course they do. Of course they do. So yeah, it's just hard to quantify, but we all know that it's certainly true.
Yeah, it's great. And you guys do great work. I'm so fortunate to know you guys and get to connect with you guys and get a peek into your world, Jack. I can't thank you enough for coordinating the ride along. Hopefully it's something I can pull out again and do again because it was so much fun. And I think it's, one thing I loved about it is it seemed like, yes, it's the similar job every day, but then the mission is different every single day.
Oh, it is. It is.
That's what was really cool. Admittedly, too, we had a little bit of downtime. Got kind of quiet for a little bit.
Not unusual.
You did actually recommend that I do the night shift, but I had some obligations that evening, so unfortunately I didn't do the night shift. I maybe would have had a little more action.
Yes, you would.
But one thing that was really cool is we actually got to tour around a little bit. Did the transition along from Malibu to LAX essentially, where you're pretty low.
That shoreline transition. One of my favorites in the world.
Yeah, and that was super cool. I mean, that's just a helicopter thing, right? Man, you don't get to get that view unless you're in a helicopter. And so thank you so much to LAPD for hosting. We should definitely chat. Maybe we can collaborate on posting this with LAPD. If that's something that they're open to, that would be cool. And big thanks to both of you for law enforcement, for serving in law enforcement, and then for giving law enforcement a little bit of a voice. We live in a great generation now with social media and podcasting, and it can get a little overwhelming, but with the right people doing the right things, you guys are really illuminating the work that law enforcement does. So if you're listening to the podcast today and you haven't checked out Hangar Z, do yourself a huge favor and do so, especially if you have any interest in getting into law enforcement, whether it's on the ground or even the aviation unit. I mean, John and Jack collectively have many, many years of law enforcement experience, and they've done a lot of different things in law enforcement. So they're great resources and fantastic people to know. Guys, thanks for coming on the Helicopter Podcast. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Halsey, thanks for having us, and thanks for allowing us to share a message with folks that may not be in our immediate community. The aviation community as a whole is very tight and very small, but typically we're talking to folks that are in our even smaller community of just public safety aviation. So really cool to talk to folks and hopefully shed some light on an industry that may be interesting to them. Like Halsey said, if you're looking at public safety aviation and you're trying to figure out how to get in, you can always message us. You can look for the episode released on getting into public safety aviation. But it's an adventure, as Halsey said. You leave the hangar and you depart and have no idea where you're going to end up, and it's fun. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Jack?
One last thing about the ride-along situation before everybody gets excited and thinks they're going to get a ride-along. They're not. That was something. I'm retired. I'm away from there, but I worked at that for you because, well, you're Halsey Scheider. I mean, come on, who wouldn't want to take him in a helicopter?
I'm a big deal.
That's right. And so that was special. That was a special request, and I was happy that they were willing to do that. Thank you, Manny. And I'm glad you got to do it because it gave you insight to something, a part of aviation that you hadn't seen firsthand. And I thought that was important for you in your position to have seen, and hopefully that helps you in your job. So I was glad to do it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And maybe we'll get that to go again.
I'm just saying, I mean,
you behave yourself. We'll see.
I'm a pretty big deal in the helicopter world. So, I mean,
that's what I said.
No,
I
I really appreciate it. And honestly, it was such a cool insight for me. Yeah. And to be able to go and live, and that's why I do this podcast, right? I don't always get to go and ride along, but I get to have these conversations with people that do jobs that I've never done and will never do. And so it's fun to vicariously learn and live through what their experiences are. And I think that's the neat part of this platform. And it's just cool for me. It's just a conversation that I get to have. And then, I figured my mom would listen, and now we're on a platform together doing cool things, And so feeling very lucky. To our listeners, thank you so much for supporting us. If it wasn't for you guys, I don't think we would have the platform that we have. And to MHM Publishing, Mike and Linda Reno, you guys are killing it and doing big things. And we couldn't be more thankful for the Vertical HeliCAST platform. to my other podcasters on the platform, including John and Jack. Just so lucky to be within this group. You guys are special people, and we're doing really cool things. So I'm just lucky to be a part of it. I'm so excited for this industry. It's a small industry that we're in, but it's truly a brother and sisterhood that's just so unique, I feel like. And I'm so excited for Verticon because that's a place where you get to go and nerd out and geek out with a bunch of other helicopter dorks for 3 days. Hillary, my wife, talks about it like, man, it's like family. It's like there's family members that you see once a year, and it's like when you see them, it's like no time had passed. And that's what HAI, now Verticon, feels like for us. We go there, and it's like we're seeing people that we see once a year, and we love it. So can't wait to see you guys. John, it'd be good to see you in person. Jack, we had lunch yesterday, man.
Yeah, we did.
We can't get enough of each other, and I'm so lucky that you live here.
See you soon.
See you guys. Appreciate you coming on the Helicopter Podcast. See ya.
Cheers.
Thanks.
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support. Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company. The choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.